India and the European Union have signed or concluded a free trade agreement. Yesterday, it was announced in New Delhi. The two sides look to expand trade by billions of dollars and new opportunities for Indian industry in the strategic sector, in trade, in exports, and a lot of things. Ambassador Manjeev Puri has been India's ambassador to the EU a while back. Ambassador Puri, how do you see this trade deal? What has happened and why it has happened?
So Ajay, first of all, I want to tell you, I'm very glad it's happened. I see it very positively. The European Union is India's largest trading partner in goods. Our trade is about $140 billion. Yeah. It is not only a large trading partner, it is the largest foreign investor in India. And what do you and I do? Isn't it a level of comfort that we have when we see European products? Their standards apply in India. So there is a great deal of economic interaction, which is not of today, but has been there for generations, if I may say so. When we bring about this kind of an agreement, what do? We do several things. One is, on the trade front, we look at and we signal opportunities for the future. We lower tariffs. Tariffs make a difference. The word tariff is not so familiar with India. Customs duty is the word that we are familiar with. Mr. Trump has made the word tariff an extremely important word. But when customs duties get lowered, you get goods from the world at more competitive prices. The Europeans get it, we get it. And these are advantages. For me, this deal is, of course, about trade, but it's much more than that. It is a very important deal because of the India-Europe economic close relationship built up over the years. What it does is, it signals to European business that India is lowering its protectionist barriers. We've always been known as a country which is kind of protectionist. It's lowering the barriers. It is opening itself to trade, and it's providing a legal framework for this to happen. What does this do? So Ajay, when you are an investor, we in India for long have believed our market is sufficient. But actually that's not a fact. What companies want is not just the big market that you have, but the freedom to be able to import, export, build a value chain, build a supply chain. When we had protectionist higher tariffs, etc., and all of this hopefully will change next year when this happens, they calculate all of this as being not so very, let me say, economically viable. And so therefore the greatest thing in this agreement is, of course, trade will go up. From $140 billion, it will certainly go up. Sometimes the targets are ambitious, necessarily so. But it will signal to European industry, invest in India. We have a stable and legally tenable regime which allows you to do what is required in terms of building the supply chain. And therefore, for me, particularly important in our quest towards Viksit Bharat 2047.
Ambassador Puri, you have brought out a very big, vast expanse of India-EU relations. To tell our viewers and listeners, India exports around $76 billion worth of goods to Europe, around $86 billion goods to US. Sir, has this deal between India and EU come about because the changed geopolitical circumstances with Europe and America not being the best of friends in the past few weeks?
So Ajay, let me say this to you. Everybody is talking about the deal having been under negotiation for 20 years, of course. But trade has also been going up, isn't it? Yes, in the last several years, principally after COVID, when the Europeans, who have a very vast relationship with China, people realized that, look, we also need other trusted partners. The Chinese, there could be a number of issues on that. And so therefore, this kind of things are important. They happen in the world. The Europeans, who were very sanguine in a relationship across the Atlantic and another one with China, also are realizing, as something which we in India have known for a long time, that you need to do multi-alignment. We, as the largest country in the world, the fourth largest economy, obviously look like an alternative. Not an alternative, as one of the options. They've also done a similar deal with the Latin American countries. They've got one going with ASEAN. So they are also diversifying. Now, when you talk about President Trump, and that's the question that you said, look, as far as I'm concerned, thank you, President Trump. What's the issue? If somebody else provides a segue for your and my things happening in a good way, it's all right. I'm happy to say thank you. I never asked him to do what he's doing. And I am glad that the Europeans now have acknowledged, and this time in a legally tenable document, that India is a country of interest to them. India is an economy which has a future, and this is a trusted partner as far as we are concerned, and this is important. We have also reciprocated. So that it's come about for that for me is all right. I'm very happy to say thank you. What difference does it make?
So, do you think, Ambassador Puri, that this India-US deal will go forward or will lag a bit, or do we have the gumption to take on the US at the moment and tell these are the red lines? We have conveyed the red lines. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has made it very clear or elucidated many times that we have conveyed the red lines to the US. Sir, these red lines on agri and dairy, will America agree to without the agri and dairy part of the deal?
So Ajay, let's start with the European Union. Like the Americans, they've been there, done everything. Why did many of these things not happen in the past? Because they were maximalist in their approach, and we were also maximalist in our defensive approach. Agriculture was a red line. What did they say as a result of, let me say, turbulence in geopolitics? That let's cut down on what is our maximalist position. What did we say? We also said, yes, there is a turbulence in the way the world is. We also need to become a little easier on what they want to do. So we reduced duties on high value goods and so on and so forth. They kept agriculture out. This is the nature of the game. Now, when you talk about India-US, look, I have no doubt the United States is a major trading partner for us. It's a major economic partner for us. It's a major economic player in the world. And we should try and see that we have a relationship with them which is grounded in terms of a legal binding or a legally made construct. Look, we have spent a large part of our life looking at multilateralism, the World Trade Organization, etc. The organization wouldn't have come about if the United States in the early 1990s had not said yes. But now, if there are feelings there, especially with the Trump administration, that most favored nation doesn't work and these sort of things don't work, then you need to have legalistic constructs which take things forward. Should we work on the trade deal with US? Of course we should. Do we have to protect our own interests, agriculture being one of them? Of course we have to. We are a democracy. We have to be responsive to our people. But the United States also, I am sure in their own way, those who are thinking people there realize that this is a large market and this is a market of interest to them. And so therefore, let's see how it works out. You know, sometimes the noise is much greater than what those people who are thinking about it are working on it. So the way I look at it is, I am very glad we have the deal with the EU. I am glad that we are looking at other trading partners, and I think we've had about 8 or 10 trading deals in the last several years. We need to build autonomy in all of this, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to deal with another one of your largest trading partners. Let's remember, there are only about 4 or 5 geographies in the world with whom we have $100 billion and above trade. US is one of them. The UAE, European Union, and ASEAN, and China. China, we can't do a trade deal for obvious reasons. And so therefore, you must pursue this. And these are not to be looked at as contradictory and one versus the other, not at all. This is part of India looking at its multi-alignment, strategic autonomy. I dare say the Europeans have also looked at it in the same manner.
Ambassador, I'll take you back. I'll request you to address this part of history. Post World War II, America and Europe became allies, created the NATO, and large part of the world believes that Europe toes the American line. Do you think that tomorrow, Ambassador, Europe and America could be back as being best friends, and India could see barriers coming up in trade with Europe? Could that happen?
So let me say this to you. The world as we see post the Second World War is, in a simplistic way, Pax Americana. And what was Pax Americana? Fundamentally bedrocked on transatlantic unity. We talk about NATO and so on and so forth. In some broad sense, there was a meeting of minds. It doesn't mean that Europe and the United States saw eye to eye on everything. There was climate change. Even on military interventions, they sometimes look. But they didn't rock each other's unity. That seems to be getting rocked at the moment. That they can come together, how can we say that they can't come together? I think there's a huge groundswell of public opinion and political view in the United States that no matter that the Europeans are tough, they keep talking about rules-based orders. They are kind of hindrances to our enterprise and our innovation. They really believe that, look, these are, after all, our cousins. I want to remind you what President Trump said at Davos at a time when people said that, he was finger-wagging the Europeans. Yes, but he also said, my mother is Scottish and I have German ancestry. So let's accept these things happen. Shouldn't we be much more worried about something else, which is the rising situation of China? And that's what we should be much more worried about. And there we need to be a little more mindful that as current things stand, is there a likelihood of the United States and the Chinese coming together on something in various ways? That is something that we need to be much more concerned about. Will it happen or not? Look, individuals are taking decisions. What answer can I give you? But Europeans and Americans being on the same page, in some senses, think about this. Isn't that good in terms of keeping China's hegemonic rise in the check?
Yeah, it does. Ambassador Puri, you have raised a very important point about how India keeping an eye on China, or we need to keep an eye on China. So the EU, as I draw something out of your own answer, EU, as you said, they are cousins. Europeans are cousins with the Americans, kind of white race people,
Yeah.
and they have been historically making the rules of the world since post World War II. So you think that India will now, what it always talks about, multi-alignment. Now this multi-alignment comes into play totally when we talk to Europe separately and the US separately, and we are still talking to the US about a trade deal, a possible trade deal. Multi-alignment comes into fore.
So Ajay, look, when in the world there's been multipolarity, the global south, India included, has been able to get several things forward. Look at the climate agenda, the humanitarian assistance agenda. Many of these things happen, even the trade agenda. When these two superpowers in terms of economies, the United States at $31 trillion, Europe at $28 trillion, there's some little leeway between them that you can express. So this is the nature of the way you play global politics. Nothing wrong in it. It's perfectly legitimate. It may be rules-based. Of course, everybody realizes it's a power-based thing. The game of the world has been power. It hasn't changed in various ways. But multilateralism allowed a certain kind of rules-based elements to that. As far as we are concerned, we have always strongly stood for strategic autonomy. In the old days, we used to talk of non-alignment. Let me forget that word, multi-alignment. And why is it important? Think of this. India is today the largest country in the world. We are also the fourth largest economy. So in several ways, we have to stand separate and by ourselves. It doesn't mean we are not willing to be partners with different people, especially with whom there aren't hegemonic issues like the Chinese, etc. We are willing to be partners. We are happy to be partners. But in the end, I believe, at least that's my view, we have to be a self-standing, by itself, a pole in a multipolar world.
Ambassador Puri, you have brought out things which many our viewers will be very keen to understand in perspective of manpower mobility. The India and EU have also spoken about manpower mobility. We are told that the Indian sectors like the IT sector and the business and financial sectors are open to our youth to go and work in European countries now. Of course, we had a manpower mobility agreement with the Germans earlier. How far is this important for our economy?
Look, in my understanding, any little movement in that is important for us. Why? As you see the United States kind of pushing back on what used to be something very good for Indians who got educated, a kind of aspiration. You could get an H-1B visa, you could move across, and so many things happens to life. If they push back on that, you have opportunities in Europe. Europe is, of course, tougher because it's not an English language speaking country. But over the last 10 years, the number of Indians in the technology sector, etc., working in Europe has gone up tremendously. And the numbers are huge. In fact, if I may just draw your attention to something which is very tragic. You remember that in the year 2016, there was this massive terrorist attack at Brussels airport. So everybody talks about the 4 Jet Airways flights which were caught and this wonderful air hostess, Nidhi Chapekar, who went through such a traumatic experience. But we lost one person. And the person we lost used to work for Infosys. He was standing on top of the explosive device in a metro train. So we've been there. We are there in larger measure. If the Europeans don't pay too much attention, or let me say, in some senses dial down this new trend in the Western world of nativism, be very restrictive. If they say for specific tasks such as performing IT or things that they need people. Today people are talking in terms of up to 5 months you can go, some kind of gateways are being established. We need to see how that happens. But European level agreements are important for countries in Europe then to start implementing all of this. And that's important.
Ambassador, how do you see, now we have read the reports, the FTA, we've seen, gone to the fine print, most of us have gone through that. Cheaper cars like Mercedes and BMW, the Audi, and better availability of the cheaper availability of European wines, European cheese, and also many things which Indians always had to import or had to pay heavy tariffs on those. The things costed almost double the cost. Now we are looking at cheaper cars, cheaper wine or cheaper cheese. How do you see that?
Look, as an individual, many persons and people living around my house would say, very good, I love the idea of a Mercedes-Benz car. But the way I look at it is, that's fine. Who am I to stop people from having aspirations? Or wine or cheese, why not? Why should it only be that our product should be exported there? You know, you have to, if you want to be part of the global world, you have to start. But which are the big cars now being manufactured in India? If I may ask you, Ajay, you will turn around and say, with great difficulty, we scratch our heads and we say Tata and Mahindra, and the rest of the cars are who? Hyundai, Toyota, yes, Mercedes-Benz and so on. They're manufactured in India. What I see in the agreement is an ability not only in the cars and the manufacturing sector, but in several other areas, whether it's much more heavy industries and so on, areas where Europeans have traditionally had abilities and continue to have abilities, that we get them to manufacture in India. Today, if I ask you, most of the Mercedes-Benz cars that you see in India, they're not made in Germany, they're made in Pune. They're made here. Some very rich guys buy Maybachs, good for them. But for most people, the cars that are bought in Pune. Now, you can keep saying it's a German company, but it employs Indian people, it gives Indian wages, it pays Indian taxes.
The supply lines are in India.
Absolutely. So that's the way of looking at it. You know, you want to be part of the global world. Frankly, you can't be tightening the wall around you and sitting in a protectionist way. You have to open up.
Ambassador, our share to Europe exports several $billions of goods every year. Our share of those exports, Indian share of this or exports, Europe's imports rather, whatever Europe imports, our share is barely 1%.
Correct.
How do we grow up from there?
So, Ajay, our share of global trade is very low. This is a fact. And one of the disadvantages that we are a large market. Anybody who produces in India finds it much easier to sell in India. Now, in fact, this is a disadvantage that all large economies have. The United States, if Mr. Trump is getting very upset, he's getting upset about this, that I'm such a large market, everybody wants to sell to me. But that's the nature of the game. Smaller economies, when they do well and when they have products, they have no choice but to go out. The Chinese have appeared to be different. They've been able to do a large amount of exports. They've also been, if you recall, after the 2008 crisis, they boosted domestic consumption because they realized that you couldn't just do exports. But again, people say they're funneling exports and they will try to do a lot of dumping. They may. But generally speaking in the world, this push has to be gathered and done. Now, this agreement hopefully makes Indian industry do two things. One, become globally competitive. It's not just good enough that the market is around the corner and I can kind of cut corners and do it. You have to be globally competitive. The Europeans have some of the highest standards on everything, food products, phytosanitaries, technology products, and we haven't talked about this great thing called carbon and, you know, CBAM and etc. Yes. Let's be very clear. These are going to cost us and they will be issues. Larger Indian companies are already gearing up to do what they have to do because that's the European legislation and there's nothing you can do about it in terms of these kind of agreements. And so therefore, when you start becoming globally competitive, hopefully you'll be able to reach out much more and there'll be much more ability for people to be able to take to you. So it's not just that you are low-cost producers. You have to have the infrastructure, your productivity has to be high, and your standards have to be global.
Ambassador Puri, one last question on the defense and strategic partnership, which was announced yesterday, signed yesterday. We already have a technology tie with France to make Safran engines. Thales is here for the past 40 years. European company Airbus is making planes, military planes in India, getting a lot of stuff done for the commercial planes. There is an MBDA missile maker which is here. The German company TKMS submarine maker is ready to come here. What kind of a defense and security partnership more can be done? Because we already have one of the best technology transfers in saffron.
So, Ajay, look, fundamentally speaking, what the EU does, it's a customs union now into a monetary union and several other things. It's active in their own country. What countries of European Union do in other countries is really for them to do, which is why we are importing Rafales. We've imported defense equipment forever from the European countries. I remember the HDW deal when we brought submarines from Germany. So it's not a new thing at all. What this does is, it also says that beyond just the countries, we look at in terms of this partnership. This partnership can have very many dimensions. We'll see it. Can we become suppliers to European manufacturers of armaments? Can we become? I don't know the answers. We are talking in terms of, there's this famous thing, the Tatas assembling a large part of helicopters, which are actually American helicopters, and manufacturing it. So can we try and do something of that kind? I believe these kind of partnerships are important. There is this entire business of Indo-Pacific. But as I mentioned to you, European countries taken together do form the European Union. But the European Union is not all about what those countries do. The French are active in Indo-Pacific. The British have their own ideas. Several smaller countries are not present. But these kind of cooperations across the board, what do they say? It's not just a tariffs agreement, but a much broader economic engagement, including in the very important area of defense equipment, cyber security, counterterrorism, etc. So all in all, making the partnership closer. It's always been a big partnership, but trying to put it together, a fit for purpose for today, and taking these things forward, very positive sign.
We have had a very nice talk with Ambassador Puri. He has brought out brilliant points. For example, like Indian industry has to be ready for European parameters which they may have, including carbon taxation, and also on defense and security, including how India and EU have managed this FTA, and also how India and US will also have to do a trade deal to finish that. Thank you for speaking to us, Ambassador Puri.